snow across parts of eastern England during Saturday morning. Further west, it's largely dry, fine and sunny, but it will be cold as that wind only slowly eases down. Again, a cold feeling day. The Met Office warnings are on the Met Office website. Please keep up to date today.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hi, I'm Alistair Stewart, and I really hope that you can join me here on GB News. I've been in this game for 40 years, and I've made lots of friends. I try and reflect what they think about the big stories of the day in conversation with me. That's why we call it Alistair Stewart and Friends, and you're a key part of it as well. I always get inundated with emails and messages and texts, and if they're really good, I play them back to you. 12 till 3, every Saturday and Sunday.
Hello and welcome to the briefing with me, Isabel Oakeshott. Lots coming up today, including university students. They've already had a tough time during the pandemic, but things could be about to get even worse, with lecturers preparing to go on strike. So can a walkout be justified? And what about the students themselves? Plus, as the Channel crisis escalates, should we follow the lead of other countries who've managed to stem the tide of migrants' boats? But first, it's the news with Rhiannon Jones.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 12 o'clock. Health Secretary Sajid Javid has addressed Parliament, calling the new COVID-19 variant a huge international concern. Strict travel restrictions will be imposed on 6 African nations over the new strain, with officials saying it's the worst one we've seen so far. The World Health Organization held an emergency meeting this morning. No cases have been found in Britain yet.
We are concerned that this new variant may pose substantial risk to public health. The variant has an unusually large number of mutations. Yesterday, the UK Health Security Agency classified B11529 as a new variant under investigation, and the Variant Technical Group has designated it as a variant under investigation with very high priority.
France has pulled out of talks with the UK over what they're calling Boris Johnson's unacceptable letter about the migrant crisis. The Prime Minister outlined a series of measures to deal with the Channel crossings in a message to his counterpart Emmanuel Macron. Home Secretary Priti Patel is no longer invited for talks on Sunday. 27 people drowned in the Channel on Wednesday after a boat capsized.
2 days ago, I had a serious discussion with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And for my part, I intend to continue to apply what I do with all countries and all leaders. I'm surprised when things are not done seriously. We don't communicate between leaders on these issues via tweets or publish letters. We are not whistleblowers.
A 12-year-old girl has died following an assault in Liverpool city centre. Police say Ava White suffered catastrophic injuries shortly after the Christmas lights switch on. 4 boys, one aged 13, 2 aged 14 and a 15-year-old have been arrested on suspicion of murder. A man has appeared in court charged with murder in connection with the disappearance of an 18-year-old woman in Plymouth. Bobby Ann McLeod went missing on Saturday. Her body was found at Bovey Sand earlier this week, around 7 miles from where she was last seen. 24-year-old Cody Ackland appeared at Plymouth Magistrates Court earlier. We're being warned of a crisis in patient safety at overcrowded A&E departments. A report from the Royal College of Emergency Medicine has found that nearly 2/3 of casualty units had ambulances queuing outside on a daily basis. The Department of Health says extra funding is being provided to boost staff numbers in key areas. A national cancer charity has warned of almost 50,000 missing cases. Macmillan Cancer Support says the scale of the cancer care backlog is yet to hit the NHS. It also warns that disruption from COVID-19 this winter could see the number of missing diagnoses increase further. The number of cars made in the UK fell 41% in October compared to the same month a year ago. The industry calls this decline worrying. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders says it was the 4th straight month of decline and the weakest October since 1956. Facebook, Instagram and TikTok are launching new features to encourage people to get their coronavirus booster jabs. Users will be able to update their profiles with frames or stickers to show that they've had their top-up. It follows on from previously being able to show on social media that you've had your first and second jabs. And forecasters have warned of travel chaos as Storm Arwen is set to batter parts of the UK with 75-mile-per-hour winds. The Met Office has issued a red wind warning for parts of northeast England and Scotland from this afternoon. People are told to expect damage to buildings and homes and power lines being brought down. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now it's back to the briefing with Isabel Oakeshott.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, university students have had a raw deal during the pandemic, and just as things were beginning to get back to normal, teaching staff are now preparing to go on strike. So what's behind the walkout, and what about the students? And after the tragic death of 27 migrants in the Channel earlier this week, there's been much discussion about how to stem the tide of migrant boats. Some say we should turn them back, which is exactly what they do in Australia. I'm going to be speaking to an Australian broadcaster about how the system works there. Plus, in the latest instalment of my series of special interviews, The Cause, I'll talk to Dr. Liam Fox MP about the Down syndrome bill aiming to improve the lives of those living with the condition. And as always, give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Now, we all know that students have had an incredibly raw deal as a result of the pandemic, which has completely overshadowed and in many cases ruined their university experience. For the best part of 2 years, almost everything they signed up for was either cancelled or moved online, and they ended up either stuck at home with their parents whilst paying thousands of pounds for student accommodation that they couldn't use, or imprisoned in student flats or halls of residence where they were unable to mix with anyone beyond their bubbles. They had no real-life contact with lecturers, they never saw the inside of a lecture theatre, and they couldn't have any fun. Yet they were still expected to pay over £9,000 a year for the privilege. Just as things were beginning to get back to some form of normal, and even that hasn't happened in many universities, teaching staff at 58 institutions are preparing to go on strike. From Wednesday next week, lecturers at 33 universities are walking out over their pay and pensions, and that includes universities of Cambridge, Durham, Leeds, London School of Economics, Birmingham, Bristol, York, Glasgow. I could go on, all the big names are there. And teaching staff at a further 21 universities are striking over their pay. Lecturers at a bunch of other universities say they are going to be working to rule indefinitely. And more strikes are planned for the new year. So you really have to wonder why any student should have to pay for the so-called service they've received since the pandemic began. Now, lecturers, in their defence, say that their pay has fallen by 20% over the past 12 years because of inflation. They're unhappy about all sorts of other stuff. They're insecure contracts, for one. They're also complaining about a gender pay gap, which is very significant in that sector. And they're unhappy about having to pay more into their pension pots. That's a final salary scheme of the kind that has been phased out in almost all other workplaces because it is too generous. Now, in case you're not feeling sorry for them yet, according to the University and College Union, which has organised the strike, quote, staff are also experiencing a crisis of work-related stress, with over half of them showing signs of depression, probable signs of depression, I should say. As for the students, well, I'm not sure the union is too worried about them. Perhaps the lecturers have a point. After all, many are paid only around a tenth of what university vice-chancellors earn. Nonetheless, it's pretty rough for students who seem to have had to tolerate so much over the past couple of years. Well, with me to talk about the student experience is Lucas de Gutis, a student at Leeds University. And one of the many places, Leeds, I think, where there's going to be a strike next week unless there's a last-minute change of heart.
Yes.
And so what do you understand about why your teaching staff are walking out? And do you have any sympathy for them?
So university staff will be striking because, as you mentioned, they are unhappy with some of the work conditions. So things like pension cuts, pay cuts, equality pay gaps, and also just general workload. And that follows after a 76% vote by the UCU, the University and College Union, and they voted in favour of a strike.
Now, I think that the turnout for the vote was actually quite low. I mean, they have to have over 50%, I believe, and in both cases on the issue of whether to strike over pay and whether to strike over pensions, they were really only getting just over 50% turnout, 51 and 53, I think. So it wasn't as if there was overwhelming rush to vote in favour of balloting. But as you say, once they had voted, those that did vote were very much in favour of this action. But from the point of view of students, tell me about how much contact time you have had with your teaching staff over the last couple of years.
Well,
you're in your third year, right?
Yes, so I'm in my third year at Leeds University, and in answer to your question, very little at all.
When were you last in a lecture theatre with a bunch of other students, which is presumably what you thought you'd signed up for?
Yes, it was what we all signed up for. And I have to tell you, the last time I stepped foot in a lecture theatre was 21 months ago.
I mean, this is just incredible, isn't it? 21 months ago is the last time that you had the kind of teaching that you would have expected when you signed up to be a student at Leeds.
Yeah. And to put it into context, I'm graduating, or supposed to be graduating, in 6 months.
Right.
And I'm still not convinced that I will be back in a lecture theatre before I leave education and go out into the world.
And for the benefit of this, you have paid how much so far?
Well, if we are just considering tuition fees, that's £9,250 a year. So that's 2 years already sort of paid. But then there's also living costs. I mean,
of course.
It's not cheap to live as a student.
And were you in halls of residence for a lot of that time, or rented accommodation, or did you go back during the pandemic back to your family?
So in my first year, as many students, I was in university halls. And then halfway through, of course, the pandemic hit. And luckily, we were allowed to return home and receive some money back from university halls.
How much did you get? Oh, that was just for your rent, not for your tuition?
Yes, that was just for rent. Tuition, there's been no refund costs or anything like that. So, and then in my second year, I was in private rented accommodation. And that was a bit different because when you're in private rented accommodation, lots of landlords don't really care if you don't need to be in the city because university is suddenly online.
Yes.
So what you ended up seeing was lots of students just stuck in these rent contracts when they don't even need to attend university, but they suddenly have to be in this new city, some of them by themselves, paying massive amounts of money and just doing university via Zoom.
And what is quite surprising, I think, about this is the National Union of Students is actually supporting the lecturers over their strike next week. I think they think that we're all in it together. That's their attitude, and there's a common enemy. How do you feel about that? Do you think the NUS has got its position right on that? And by the way, we did ask somebody from the NUS to come on. I made extensive efforts to get somebody from the University and College Union to come on. Surprise, surprise. They didn't seem to be too enthusiastic, probably knew that I was going to give them short shrift. Do you feel that it's right that the National Union of Students is supporting this strike, given what you've just described?
I think it's quite ironic, given that it's a union for students and they should be looking out for students' well-being. I mean, it's sort of in the name. And yeah, I'm quite disappointed by the NUS. Luckily, in Leeds, our student union has actually, to my surprise, gone out and said this is not right, we do not support these strikes. And they actually received a lot of backlash, as you say, from a sort of minority of people who think strikes are the best way to do this. Disruption is key. We must, disrupt people's learning in order to sort of get past all of these working conditions. And I just don't think it's fair. I don't think there's anyone representing students who may be sitting at home disappointed that they've worked so hard to get to university and, spent so much time on their A-levels or BTEC, just put in so much effort. And then they get there and it's like they're not receiving the education they signed up for, and then also no one's speaking out for them.
So what do you think should happen now? Do you believe that students still have a strong case to be refunded a good portion of their tuition fees? And presumably, if next year is going to be disrupted by this strike action, which the union has said is not just next week, by the way, Wednesday to Friday, they've got plans to do more in the new year. Do you think, why don't students take a class action? Is that something you've thought about?
Yeah, there's definitely been a conversation, especially during lockdown, when we just thought it was completely unfair to keep paying, the same amount of tuition fees, bearing in mind that there wasn't even online learning at one point during lockdown. There was a complete cancellation of all lectures, of all seminars. So we were sat at home doing absolutely nothing, but no one even spoke about perhaps we should cut the tuition fees or perhaps we should offer a refund. So it's quite disappointing, but it's a mixed bag when it comes to students. Some of them are in support of strike action. Some of them have really sort of twisted ideologies where we should completely get rid of tuition fees. So there's no clear conversation.
Yeah.
And it is quite difficult.
You guys need to get organised. I think a class action could get a lot of support. Well, listen, thank you, Lucas, for coming in to talk about that. Now, we had hoped to go to Joe Johnson, now in the House of Lords, obviously Boris Johnson's father. He is a former universities minister, and we had hoped to have him on to talk about this, but we've been having some technical issues. So hopefully we will get him on another time, because unfortunately, I don't think this issue is going away, really, is it? No. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you.
And I hope you get back in a lecture theatre sometime soon. So next, we'll have the latest on the migrant crisis, and I will be talking to an Australian broadcaster about how they managed to tackle the issue there. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Storm Arwen is hitting the UK today. There are a number of Met Office warnings issued, and there is a threat to life across parts of the east coast of Scotland, northeast England, where the winds are going to be particularly severe. Here is that storm system heading its way south through the North Sea, but it's as the isobars squeeze together here across first northern and then eastern Scotland down into northeast England. later today that the winds will potentially cause some significant damage and disruption. But right across the UK, the winds will be picking up through the day and we could see some problems. So there is a number of warnings in place, yellow warnings covering much of the UK, but the most severe weather likely across the eastern side of Scotland into north-east England. There will be snow accompanying those strengthening winds as well over the hills across northern Scotland. We have warnings in place for that snow also. For the bulk of the heart of the country, plenty of sunshine around through this afternoon, some rain across East Anglia and the southeast, showers in the west, feeling cold out there, and particularly as those winds strengthen. The strongest winds likely late afternoon into the evening down that eastern side of Scotland into northeast England, damaging gusts of wind, flying debris, the threats to power, certainly major disruption to travel routes along that coastal strip. But everywhere, gusty winds through this evening and overnight, and this zone of wet weather sinking south, well, that could bring a covering of snow, certainly over hills, but even in places at low levels. The winds will remain strong. That'll help to keep the temperatures up a little bit, but if you are heading out tonight, it will feel cold. A cold start to the weekend. The winds will slowly ease during Saturday, but still very lively, and still the potential for this mixture of rain, sleet and snow across parts of eastern England during Saturday morning. Further west, it's largely dry, fine and sunny, but it will be cold as that wind only slowly eases down. Again, a cold feeling day. The Met Office warnings are on the Met Office website. Please keep up to date today.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Well, after the tragic death of 27 migrants in the Channel earlier this week, politicians are busy playing the blame game. Though it's still business as usual for the people traffickers who aren't going to let the loss of life get in the way of their racket. Boris Johnson said he was shocked by the disaster, though if he'd been paying any attention to multiple warnings from multiple organisations that this was always going to happen, he would not have been remotely surprised. For the last 20 months, Nigel Farage, and much of it with GB News, has led the way on this story, charting the appalling people trafficking of asylum seekers and economic migrants from France to the Kent coast. Mainstream media did their very best to ignore this story until the numbers coming became so enormous that they were forced to recognise we had a big problem. Now, this is an extraordinarily divisive issue, and I think Downing Street would have been delighted by yesterday's headlines and again today, where everybody was largely blaming the French. Of course, the French blame us for being too welcoming to people coming over in boats, not least because we almost never send anyone back. And today the rows escalated. France's Emmanuel Macron has accused Prime Minister Boris Johnson of not being serious when he called for France to take back the migrants. And Emmanuel Macron has also withdrawn an invitation to Home Secretary Priti Patel to attend a joint summit. So things are not exactly getting any better. Well, here with the latest on these developments is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, why has France taken such issue with Boris Johnson's letter, which was clearly designed to be constructive?
Well, we're in the blame game. That's why I was in Dover yesterday. I predicted that there wouldn't be anything constructive, despite the naive optimism in some sections of the media saying that they believed that the death of 27 people in the Channel would bring everyone together to try to find a solution for that. Not a bit of it. You've got France pointing the finger at the UK, saying that the pull factors are there and that they need to do something to stop people being so attracted to coming to the UK. And you've got Priti Patel, Boris Johnson and others who are pointing the finger right back at the French and saying you're not doing enough to stop these people leaving the beaches of France in the first place. Now, what the French president and his various government ministers are saying today is that they are very angry that what Boris Johnson is doing is effectively holding these negotiations on trying to find the best solution in the public sphere by tweeting it out, giving it to the press in advance. But the French are doing exactly the same. Both sides are at it, and the charities are at it as well, blaming the British for their asylum policy and being completely uncaring. So every side, it seems, is entrenched and pointing fingers, and, you know, whether we'll come up with anything constructive at the end of this, I'm very doubtful.
I mean, one of the things that the Prime Minister has offered, and apparently has been repeatedly offered over recent months, has been for UK Border Force officials and some of our own police to help the French on their side, to help man this long stretch of coast to try to prevent some of these departures. That sounds on the face of it helpful, but Emmanuel Macron rightly points out that if we were offered a bunch of French policemen to come and march along the Kent coast, we might not be that keen on that either.
Yeah, I mean, it's couched in sovereignty terms, but, you know, it's national pride, isn't it? You don't want the British to have to come and help you out on your beaches that you should be properly guarding. You have a duty of care as a sovereign nation as well to stop people embarking on a journey that's clearly dangerous, and 27 people drowned in French waters. That was an issue that the French should have stopped, and we've seen these images that show French police in small numbers on that beach. They clearly, if they had tried to intervene to stop a boat full of mainly men trying to get off, it could have ended very badly for their security services there. They need many more personnel of their own there. There is a suspicion on this side of the Channel that they are actually relatively happy for people on a transitory route just to keep on with their journey and get out of their hair.
You absolutely get that impression from some of those images of the French police standing by, that actually they're sort of nodding this through in a way because it takes the problem somewhere else. I mean, in a sense, it gives the problem to us and allows them just to have fewer people to deal with, quite bluntly. So where do we go from here?
Well, in the immediate future, you've got the spectacle now of a meeting that has been called effectively a crisis meeting on Sunday in Calais to talk about this issue that is going to have the French, the Belgian, the Netherlands governments, the German government, the European Commission, and it's going to freeze out the British government on what is absolutely an issue that is affecting the UK. It's here they want to come to. There is this issue about a returns policy that France is not at all happy about. But this is an interesting one because actually, if you think about it logically, it could be a solution for France. Short-term pain, but if they're being stopped and returned back to France, they're not going to congregate on the beaches of northwest France knowing they're immediately going to be returned.
So you would hope. Well, listen, Mark, I think it's very clear that we're not going to have any short-term fixes on this.
Not a chance.
We would expect to see more boats probably over the weekend.
As soon as the weather improves, Isabel, they'll be back out there in significant numbers. There are thousands across the northwest coast of France waiting to get across.
Right, thank you very much, Mark. Your work is cut out for you over the next few days. Now, when it comes to this issue of migrants, some say we should set about creating a safer route for those fleeing war-torn countries. Others point out that most of those who come are not actually in danger of persecution, certainly not in France. They're just economic migrants who are in search of a better life, and that we should just turn them back. Well, turn them back is exactly what they do in Australia. In 2013, the Australian government launched Operation Sovereign Borders, a military-led approach to stop people smugglers and people arriving by boat. The government of Australia is very, very clear. Anyone who attempts an unauthorised boat voyage to Australia will be turned back to their point of departure or returned to their home country or transferred to another country. That's what they say. And in case anyone is still in any doubt, the Australian government adds that, quote, no one who travels illegally to Australia by boat will be allowed to remain in Australia. With me to discuss Australia's hardline policy towards anyone who arrives in boats is the Australian broadcaster and radio host Tom Switzer, who has kindly stayed up extremely late to come on this show. Hello, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Isabel, it's a great pleasure.
Now, what do you make of what's happened in the Channel here this week?
Well, it brings back memories. You mentioned 2013. It actually goes back to the late 1990s and early 2000s in Australia, when there was a widespread sense that the nation had lost control of its borders. There was a huge influx of unauthorised arrivals. And the then Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister John Howard, put in place tough border protection policies. And they included plans to resettle them, refugee offshore processing, but also a policy of turning back the boats. And I think it's fair to say that despite the fact that the Labor government watered down those policies from 2008 and 2013, the problem began again. The Australian government since, under Tony Abbott and then Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison, have reinvigorated those border protection policies, and the boats have stopped. Lives have been saved, and this ghastly people smuggling racket has had to look elsewhere for their wicked trade.
I mean, at some point, presumably boats did actually have to be turned back to send out the message that the government was serious. Do you remember how that operation played out? And was it dangerous? I mean, people here who are rather more sympathetic towards the migrants' plight like to paint this as the prospect of the authorities tipping people into the water. Is that what happened in Australia?
Well, I mean, the starting point is to recognise that deterrence against the people smuggling racket, and let's be frank, it is a business model. There is a people smuggling racket taking place clearly in the English Channel. And to defeat it requires deterrence, and that means firmness, even harshness. And you don't deter traffickers by being gentle and compassionate. And as I say, that policy worked because the boats stopped and the people smugglers had to go elsewhere. Now, admittedly, the measures were severe, and indeed the refugee offshore processing continues, and there's allegations about human rights abuses persist. It's not perfect. But the bottom line here, I think, and this is very relevant for a Britain that's embraced Brexit, tough border protection policy acts as a declaration that the nation state is in charge of its destiny. It's not the United Nations or the ICC, it's the nation state and it's the people's representatives. So I think it can work in Britain. What you need, though, is firmness and a will to put in place those harsh policies, which are controversial.
Indeed they are. And of course, one thing that the refugee campaigners and human rights lot will say is that it's against international law to turn people back on these journeys. Australia had those very criticisms levelled at it, and essentially your government brazened it out. They said, we're going to do this anyway. Is that right?
That's right. And now, admittedly, there are key differences. I mean, France is a lot closer to England than, say, Indonesia is to Australia. So there's more water in between. There's more leverage to actually push them back. And I think the other point is most of the boats, I mean, you know, a lot of the boats, my understanding is in the English Channel, they're small boats, the fragility of the craft. So turning back the boats has its issues, but it's not just about turning back the boats, Isabel. It's also a policy of offshore processing. And there could be, from my sense, any number of nations in Africa, Ghana, Morocco. I know that Albania has been mentioned. They presumably would be happy to reach some kind of financial arrangement with Britain whereby people are processed in those countries, and there'd have to be an understanding that most of them would be found not to be refugees. But as I say, the bottom line is there has to be a will in Westminster to put in place those kind of policies because they are controversial. You'll have The Guardian every day running front page stories. The BBC would be raising awareness of this quite rightly. But ultimately, it's the people's decision and they need their borders protected. Otherwise, there's a great danger that nation states will cease to exist.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, listen, thank you so much, Tom Switzer, Executive Director of the Centre for Independent Studies and an Australian broadcaster and brilliant radio host. Thank you. After the break, we'll continue this conversation about the migrant crisis and how to tackle it with the MP for Dover. That is the constituency at the heart of the crisis. But first, it's your news headlines.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. Health Secretary Sajid Javid has addressed Parliament calling the new COVID-19 variant a huge international concern. The World Health Organization held an emergency meeting this morning. Strict travel restrictions will be imposed on 6 African nations over the new variant. Officials say it's the worst one we've seen so far. No cases have been found in Britain as of yet. France has pulled out of talks with the UK over what they're calling Boris Johnson's unacceptable letter about the migrant crisis. The Prime Minister is urging France to allow all illegal migrants crossing the Channel to be returned. 27 people drowned in the Channel on Wednesday when a boat they were in capsized. A 12-year-old girl has died following an assault in Liverpool city centre. 4 boys, one aged 13, 2 aged 14 and a 15-year-old have been arrested on suspicion of murder. Police say Ava White suffered catastrophic injuries shortly after the Christmas lights switch on. Extinction Rebellion are blocking roads outside multiple Amazon warehouses around the UK in a Black Friday protest. A spokesperson for the climate group say they want to draw attention to what they're describing as exploitative and environmentally destructive business practices. An Amazon spokesperson said they take their responsibilities very seriously. And forecasters have warned of travel chaos as Storm Arwen is set to batter parts of the UK with 75-mile-per-hour winds. The Met Office has issued a red weather warning for wind in parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland from this afternoon. I'll be back with a full update at the top of the hour. See you then.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Well, the issue of migrants crossing the Channel has been dominating the agenda this week after the tragic death of 27 migrants in the Channel. Dover is at the very centre of the crisis, and I'm delighted that their local MP, Natalie Elphicke, has taken time out of her day to join us now. Natalie, how much of a strain are these arrivals putting on your constituency?
Well, we've had over 25,000, approaching now 26,000 people this year alone come into Dover through the small boats crossings. This is not far off the size of the town of Dover itself. It's an enormous number. Kent County Council, who has specific responsibility for the unaccompanied children and young adults, has had to say it can't take any more on multiple occasions and ask other local authorities around the country for help. So it's an enormous number of people who've been making the crossings this year, and it's got to be brought to an end.
And how much contact have you had with the Home Secretary on this issue? You are the MP for the area where these arrivals are happening. As you say, it's having a profound impact on services in your area. Has the Home Secretary been in fairly regular contact with you? Is there a sort of open dialogue there?
Yeah, very much. I mean, the Home Secretary is someone who, as you would expect, I speak to frequently about these issues, her and her team, and indeed have spoken to the Prime Minister on several occasions about this as well. There's a clear determination to bring an end to the small boats crossings route, and that's what needs to happen. I was somewhat dismayed and concerned by the reaction of France over the last 24 hours. Britain has offered assistance, it has offered support, and I hope that President Macron will take that up so that people can be kept safe in France.
I mean, you say there's a clear determination to stop this happening, but we've been in this situation for a very, very long time now. There's nothing new about these migrant boats coming over. The numbers have been getting bigger and bigger over a very long period of months, if not years. Why is it proving so intractable?
Because they're leaving the French shores in increasingly large numbers. We've seen from a trickle of boats, just a handful a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we've seen a number of these people smuggling gangs all decide to use this same route across the Channel from Calais in northern France to Britain. And they have changed their tactics over that time. One that they particularly use is what's called the surge tactic, which is when there is a more calm day, they will put many, many boats into the water at the same time and overwhelm the authorities. But we've also seen that in addition to their changing techniques and tactics, we have seen only just a few hours before this week's tragedy, French police standing by and doing nothing while migrant boats got ready, while people got in them, while they got the engine attached, and even with children on board, they still did not intervene. So it is clear that more needs to happen on the French side. They have had instances where they've had their French police attacked on the beaches. So if they need more people, then the UK stands ready to help them with that. And I really hope they will take up that offer. The safest way to keep people in France, the best way to make sure that the small boats crossing comes to an end is to make sure those boats don't leave France in the first place.
But it sounds as if you think it's all on France, this. They're entirely to blame. Is that your characterisation?
Well, the boats are leaving from France. They're not leaving from Dover. So it absolutely starts with stopping the boats leaving France in the first place. Then there is the turnaround at sea and the returns, of which fastening the moving more quickly on the processing and returns policy is absolutely vital. And I was listening earlier to the Australian experience, and I think a lot of consideration has been given of the Australian and Greek experience in actually tackling the issues that they've had. And what we've seen from Australia is if you do take clear and firm action, then problems quickly come to an end, and also lives are saved.
Would you be in favour of pushing the boats back then?
I think there are three things that need to happen, and those are stopping the boats leaving, turning them around, and making sure there's effective returns. And that turnaround, it should be Britain and France working together with a shared security area across the Channel, so that wherever boats are picked up, they can be safely and quickly returned to France. This is an incredibly dangerous journey. We've seen loss of life, not just this week in large numbers, but now regularly over the last weeks and months.
Indeed.
So it is a serious situation, and we need to bring it to an end.
Thank you so much, Natalie Elphicke, and I do hope we will have you on again, because you've got a very strong perspective there on a constituency level. Natalie Elphicke, Conservative MP for Dover and Deal. Now, what's life like for people with Down syndrome? Every year in the UK, around 750 babies are born with this condition, which is a result of having an extra chromosome. In all, there are more than 40,000 people with Down syndrome in the UK. They typically will have some level of learning disabilities, though it is a spectrum. In the old days, it was a bleak diagnosis. Life expectancy was very short. Most of those with the conditions did die in childhood, but now it's a different story. People with Down syndrome are living well into middle age, and they're enjoying pretty rich and fulfilled lives. But that does raise a new problem. What happens when they outlive their parents? Because after all, the parents are usually their most dedicated carers. And this is a huge worry for the parents of children or young adults with Down syndrome. A new bill passing through Parliament today aims to address that growing challenge, which is, of course, a mark of success in the way Down syndrome treatment has progressed. The bill is going to create a new Down Syndrome Act. The idea is to ensure those people are given the support they need all the way through their lives. It's been drawn up by former Defence Secretary Liam Fox MP, who is also a doctor by way of background. And earlier today, I spoke to him about what he's trying to achieve. So today's a really important day. You've got the second reading of your private member's bill on Down syndrome. Talk to us about what the bill is all about.
Well, the impetus of the bill was really the fact that when I was born, your life expectancy with Down syndrome was 13 years. By the time I was a junior doctor, it was 30. Now it's 58. In other words, this is the first generation of people with Down syndrome who will outlive their parents. And that provides an urgency to do something about it, because if we don't act, there will be perfectly predictable human tragedies that will occur. It's a question of independence and dignity for those with Down syndrome, but it's also a question of the worry that parents have, what will happen when I'm not there. So we have to deal with the care issue, the long-term care issue, but we also need to deal with the other issues that people with Down syndrome face, challenges around education and special needs, and the complex medical needs. So it's about dealing with all of them, making sure that the best practice across the country is available to everybody.
And why is this issue so important to you? You mentioned that when you were born, life expectancy for Down syndrome people was 13 years. Did you have any friends with Down syndrome when you were younger? Was there some personal contact there that made this important to you?
Yes, when I was growing up, the boy next door, Drew Houston, had Down syndrome. But obviously, in my time as a doctor, I dealt with a lot of cases, and all MPs deal with the complexities of the cases of people with Down syndrome and the pressures on their families. And it's obvious sometimes it's not just that they have to deal with one, but several departments which can make life very challenging. And I think one of the reasons that we've got so much support today from across the House is that MPs have seen for themselves the problem. So all of us come at it from personal and professional and political directions.
And is there a kind of recognised pathway? Obviously, each child is different in terms of the educational process, but do parents generally still face a real battle to get their children into the right educational settings?
Well, they can, and it will vary depending on where they live. There's, of course, an amazing spectrum intellectually in people with Down syndrome. There are a lot of wrong preconceptions about the capabilities of people with Down syndrome. So it's getting the appropriate type of care. It's also recognising they have identifiable problems with identifiable solutions, and where the medical care tends to be very good across the whole country, which has, of course, contributed to the improvement in life expectancy, particularly things like neonatal care and paediatric cardiac surgery, as well as the treatment of leukemia, which is much more common in people with Down syndrome. All these things have produced an increased life expectancy, but they have produced also their own problems. So it's a question of trying to get the balance right.
And it's a huge anxiety for parents of children who have Down syndrome, this whole issue of what happens to them after I, as a parent, have gone. Is that the sort of the number one anxiety for parents in that situation as their children grow up?
I think it is increasingly a source of anxiety. We know in some parts of the country where we've got the best type of care, where we have assisted living with minimal intervention, that people with Down syndrome can be independent and can have their dignity that we would take for granted. In some parts of the country, it's not so good. We need not only to get these things in place, but to get them in place in time, so that if a parent dies, someone's life will not be upended. And getting them into the appropriate type of care is key. It's also key to avoiding the horrors of inappropriate care.
Right.
Someone ending up in elderly care or a mental health institution. I mean, that truly would be a scandal in Britain.
Does that happen?
Yes, it does happen, and it would be a scandal to see that happening at the second quarter of the 21st century in a country as advanced as the United Kingdom.
And did the lockdown and the pandemic particularly affect, in a negative way, people in these situations? Because I know that those that need residential care, because they've got learning difficulties or so on, suffered particularly from isolation. Was that a problem for this group of people, or not so much?
I think it will have been for some, not so much for others. It's pretty much like any other group in the population. The lockdown was less stressful for some than others. But the generic problems remain, and we will have to deal with them, and it's something that will have to be dealt with across the world wherever there are populations who are benefiting from real improvements in medical care. And for Britain, if we legislate on this and this becomes law, as I hope it will in early 2022, we'll be the first country in the world to legislate on this. And we talk a lot about global Britain, but it's mostly about
trade
and military power and diplomacy and so on. It's also got to be about our values. And I think if we pass this into law, then we will be a beacon in the world for others to follow.
So your bill would create a Down Syndrome Act, and that would enshrine certain rights, would it?
It will enshrine instructions from a Secretary of State to local bodies such as health authorities, CCGs, or to education authorities or local authorities, telling them what level of provision is appropriate. And of course that can't be static. That will be determined by a committee that sits and advises the Secretary of State on the changes that are going on all the time around those who have Down syndrome, to make sure that we are flexible as we move forward. There'd be nothing worse than having a piece of legislation that locks today's practices in without allowing us to be flexible in the future.
And presumably the Disability Discrimination Act wasn't enough in this case to protect, to enshrine these protections.
Well, again, you're talking about a definable population here, about 47,000 across the country, people with a very identifiable diagnosis. There's no question about whether you have Down syndrome or not. It's a simple genetic test. With identifiable needs, with identifiable treatments. People with Down syndrome won't fall into just traditional disability groupings, but it will look at care issues, it will look at specific medical treatments and therapies available. And so it's about just saying we're putting a safety net in where health authorities, education authorities and local care authorities are working at the best level. There probably won't be any impact on them. But this is about ensuring that people with Down syndrome get the level of care that I think they have a right to expect in 21st century Britain.
You talked about the misconceptions, which are quite widespread, I think, still about people with Down syndrome, and you've got a lot of young people supporting your campaign, and these are people who have managed to build quite remarkable careers in many cases. It is a spectrum, isn't it? But I think what you're saying is things are changing really quite dramatically for people born with Down syndrome now, and they can look forward to very long and very fulfilled lives.
Very much. And this bill is not about Down syndrome. It's not about a condition. It is about people who have Down syndrome. And the key point is that it's about people. It's about giving them the opportunity to live with independence, with opportunity and with dignity. And if that's not what our society is about, then I don't know what it is.
You talk about trying to correct some of these misconceptions. Of course, there's still a large number of women will choose to have terminations if they have antenatal tests that suggest that their unborn child may have Down syndrome. Is that beginning to shift at all, and would you like to see an end to that?
I don't know if it is beginning to shift, but one of the things that parents shouldn't have to consider is that their child would have a poor quality of life. This is to ensure that all children born with Down syndrome get a good quality of life in the way that we would expect for other children in our society.
I mean, you wouldn't go so far as to say that it should not be allowed to have a termination.
And I don't wish to get into that issue in this bill. This is about the children who are born in Britain with Down syndrome, that through their life that they get the opportunities and the quality of life that the rest of us take for granted.
Now, normally with private members' bills, there's very little chance of it actually becoming law unless you're lucky enough to come quite high up in the lottery. Just remind our viewers, how does it work and why has yours got a really good chance now of actually becoming legislation?
Well, we all apply for it every year and we pluck 10 out.
And you've been around a long time. And
I've been around 29 years, the first time I've been in the top 10. You go for the opportunities when they come along. Getting cross-party support and finally getting government support means that there's a real chance of getting it into law. And, you know, it's a nice thing that Parliament comes together on this. As I said, I think that MPs are supportive of this because they've seen it for themselves.
Absolutely.
They understand what parents go through, they understand what individuals face as challenges. And I think that, you know, it's nice in this day and age when there's so much talk about, you know, how we conduct our politics, that people have come together on this, and let's just hope we can persuade the House of Lords to do the same. Absolutely.
So just to reiterate then, you have cross-party support on this bill. That means hopefully it should sail through its second reading and then it goes to the Lords. Are there likely to be anybody objecting to this?
Well, I would hope that if we've got cross-party support in the House of Commons and we've got government support and the bill goes through unopposed and it comes out of its committee stage in the Commons intact, that there is no reason for the unelected House to change it in any way.
All right, here's hoping. Thank you very much and good luck with the second reading today.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we've got time for today. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Isabel Oakeshott, and the show is back every weekday from 12 noon, and I'll be back next Friday. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan, but for now, I'll leave you with the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Storm Arwen is hitting the UK today. There are a number of Met Office warnings issued, and there is a threat to life across parts of the east coast of Scotland, northeast England, where the winds are going to be particularly severe. Here is that storm system heading its way south through the North Sea, but it's as the isobars squeeze together here across first northern and then eastern Scotland down into northeast England later today that the winds will potentially cause some significant damage and disruption. But right across the UK, the winds will be picking up through the day, and we could see some problems. So there is a number of warnings in place, yellow warnings covering much of the UK, but the most severe weather likely across the eastern side of Scotland into northeast England. There will be snow accompanying those strengthening winds as well over the hills across northern Scotland. We have warnings in place for that snow also. For the bulk of the heart of the country, plenty of sunshine around through this afternoon, some rain across East Anglia and the southeast, showers in the west, feeling cold out there, and particularly as those winds strengthen. The strongest winds likely late afternoon into the evening down that eastern side of Scotland into northeast England. Damaging gusts of wind, flying debris, the threats to power, certainly major disruption to travel routes along that coastal strip. But everywhere, gusty winds through this evening and overnight, and this zone of wet weather sinking south, well, that could bring a covering of snow, certainly over hills, but even in places at low levels. The winds will remain strong. That'll help to keep the temperatures up a little bit, but if you are heading out tonight, it will feel cold. A cold start to the weekend. The winds will slowly ease during Saturday, but still very lively, and still the potential for this mixture of rain, sleet and snow across parts of eastern England during Saturday morning. Further west, it's largely dry, fine and sunny, but it will be cold as that wind only slowly eases down. Again, a cold feeling day. The Met Office warnings are on the Met Office website. Please keep up to date today.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome to On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and today I'm back in London, having spent the week broadcasting from Northern Ireland. In today's 2-hour bumper show, you lucky people, we'll be reflecting on that trip while also noting that today is Black Friday, when retailers say they're offering us a bunch of pre-Christmas bargains. But are they? All that's coming up, but first it's the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. This is your news at 1 o'clock. Health Secretary Sajid Javid has addressed Parliament, calling the new COVID-19 variant a huge international concern. Strict travel restrictions will be imposed on 6 African nations over the new strain, with officials saying it's the worst one we've seen so far. The World Health Organization held an emergency meeting this morning. No cases of the variant have been found in Britain as of yet.
We are concerned that this new variant may pose substantial risk to public health. The variant has an unusually large number of mutations. Yesterday, the UK Health Security Agency classified B11529 as a new variant under investigation, and the Variant Technical Group has designated it as a variant under investigation with very high priority.
France has pulled out of talks with the UK over what they're calling Boris Johnson's unacceptable letter about the migrant crisis. The Prime Minister outlined a series of measures to deal with the Channel crossings in a message to his counterpart Emmanuel Macron. 27 people died in the Channel on Wednesday after a boat they were in capsized.
2 days ago, I had a serious discussion with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And for my part, I intend to continue to apply what I do with all countries and all leaders. I'm surprised when things are not done seriously. We don't communicate between leaders on these issues via tweets or published letters. We are not whistleblowers.
A 12-year-old girl has died following an assault in Liverpool city centre. Police say Ava White suffered catastrophic injuries shortly after the Christmas lights switch on. 4 boys aged between 13 and 15 have been arrested on suspicion of murder. A man has appeared in court charged with murder in connection with the disappearance of an 18-year-old woman in Plymouth. Bobby Ann McLeod went missing on Saturday. A body was found at Bovisand earlier this week, around 7 miles from where she was last seen. 24-year-old Cody Ackland appeared at Plymouth Magistrates Court earlier. We're being warned of a crisis in patient safety at overcrowded A&E departments. A report from the Royal College of Emergency Medicine has found that nearly 2/3 of casualty units had ambulances queuing outside on a daily basis. The Department of Health says extra funding is being provided to boost staff numbers in key areas. A national cancer charity has warned of almost 50,000 missing cancer cases. Macmillan Cancer Support says the scale of the care backlog is yet to hit the NHS. It also warned that disruption from COVID-19 this winter could see the number of missing diagnoses increase further. Extinction Rebellion are blocking roads outside multiple Amazon warehouses around the UK in Black Friday protests. A spokesperson for the climate group say they want to draw attention to what they're describing as exploitative and environmentally destructive business practices. An Amazon spokesperson said they take their responsibilities very seriously. The number of cars made in the UK fell 41% in October. That's compared to the same month a year ago. The industry calls this decline worrying. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders said it was the 4th straight month of decline and the weakest October since 1956. Facebook, Instagram and TikTok are launching new features to encourage people to get their coronavirus booster jabs. Users will be able to update their profiles with frames or stickers to show that they've had their top-up. It follows on from previously being able to show on social media that you've had your first and second jabs. And forecasters have warned of travel chaos as Storm Arwen is set to batter parts of the UK with 75-mile-per-hour winds. The Met Office has issued a red wind warning for parts of northeast England and Scotland from this afternoon. We're being told to expect power lines to come down as well as damage to buildings and homes. You're right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour, but now let's return to Liam and On the Money.
Coming up on the money today, it's Black Friday, and we're told we should be at the shops and going online snapping up some pre-Christmas bargains. But are those discounts all they're cracked up to be? And what a day for Amazon, with workers in many countries, including the UK, planning to strike. I've spent the last few days broadcasting from Northern Ireland, and we'll be rounding off GB News Northern Ireland Week with more interviews and discussion. Each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. And today's encounter is with Mark Durkin, Dean of the Ulster University Business School, who I met in Belfast's Titanic Visitor Centre. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, your solutions, your opinions. What do you think of Black Friday and of GB News' Northern Ireland Week? Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet at gbnews. Stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on The Money. Now, shoppers are today set to splurge on what could be the biggest Black Friday yet. But the signs are the pre-Christmas discounts at the shops and online will be less generous than previous years, and they're also signs of post-pandemic shortages. The accountancy firm PricewaterhouseCoopers predicts around £8.7 billion will be spent today, up from £7.8 billion in 2019 and about twice as much as last year when the UK was in lockdown. Some big brands, though, are shunning Black Friday, and questions are being asked about the quality of the deals shoppers are being offered. Some retailers' pre-Christmas discount campaigns have lasted all week, or even the entire month of November. PwC predicts around 60% of UK adults will make Black Friday purchases as they kick off their Christmas shopping. They'll spend, on average, around £280. Not everyone's happy, of course. Extinction Rebellion campaigners are today trying to blockade Amazon depots across the UK, Europe and the US, arguing that Black Friday epitomises overconsumption. Retailers everywhere are struggling with supply chain issues, of course. And on top of that, Amazon is dealing today with work stoppages as trade unions push for higher wages and better working conditions. There are no UK Amazon depots that are unionised, but British unions are anyway staging protests in support of strikes elsewhere. And around 50 unions and protest groups worldwide have formed a Make Amazon Pay coalition, publishing a list of common demands. All this on the busiest day of the year for the online retailing giant. In sum, this is turning into the busiest, but also the noisiest and potentially the most chaotic Black Friday ever. All of which leads me to pose today's On The Money topic for debate. Black Friday, is it really worth it? Here at On The Money, we have grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. And joining me for today's discussion, we have retail expert Kay Hardcastle, as well as Phillips Graves, the consumer psychologist and author of Consumerology. And joining me in the studio, it's the personal finance expert, founder of MoneyMagpie.com, friend of the show, Jasmine Birtles. Jasmine, great to see you. Hi. And welcome to all my guests. Kate, let's go to you first. What do you make of the notion that these discounts for today's Black Friday, both in the shops and online, aren't really discounts to the extent that we're being told?
It's not a surprise. I know that most customers who are incredibly savvy, they have the world at their fingertips and can compare prices very quickly these days, know that it's perhaps not the most economical time of year to buy and get that bargain, but it's a good time of year for them to buy when they're particularly up in their spend relevant to Christmas. I think the bigger question obviously has to be, in this retail world post-pandemic, where we've got so many questions upon retailers in terms of their ethical stance, what they're doing to their stakeholders, their supply base, is it actually beyond just a sale tactic now? Do they have to get much more authentic and respectful in their transactions? And that's generally what consumers are saying. When it comes to a sale bargain period, the split tends to be the same no matter what the research. 25% of us are really switched on in bargain hunting, 25% switched off, and about half of us sit in the middle, looking for the bargain. We might react to it, we might not. So I think there is some pent-up demand relating to this year, and that's why we might see a significant year. We know a lot of the retailers, even those who've gone out and said they're not going to partake, have found their own ways to discount at this time. And I think it's one of those questions they have to ask themselves, which is, can they afford not to be discounting and look to be in that period when the customers are hungry to get best value?
Kate's laid out the sort of psychology of this quite well, hasn't she, Philip? There's a fear of missing out, what my kids call FOMO, an acronym I learnt recently. I'm behind the times. But on the other hand, there are also people thinking, well, if I can get those bargains, maybe I should go along with everyone else and bear the crowds or get online in order to try and strike a bargain. Do you think, Philip, that as the cost of living rises, as inflation goes up, that incentive, that drive among us to go for a bargain could be higher than in previous years?
I think the way that we shop means that our desire for a bargain and to look for a bargain is probably fairly stable. As we've just heard, people do have a lot of information at their fingertips. I think that the lens I would overlay on this is that most human behaviour is not consciously driven. So it's not that we arrive at this time of year and sit down and make lots of conscious decisions about what we want to do and how we do it. It's that we get drawn into a climate of influence where the media are talking about Black Friday, the people that we've bought from in the past are sending us information about Black Friday or about discounts. And so as a result of that, our attention, which is something that we manage at an unconscious level, is being directed at shopping at a higher level than it normally would. And as a result of that, we find ourselves looking at things, and every so often we'll find ourselves wanting something.
Jasmine, what do you make of this? On moneymagpie.com, you're constantly telling your readers how to spend their money more wisely. On the one hand, we've heard from both Kate and Philip there. On the one hand, people, if you get a bargain, it obviously saves you money. On the other hand, it may incentivise you to buy stuff you don't really need and your friends and family don't really want for Christmas anyway.
Exactly. So my thing about Black Friday, I'm a complete Scrooge, as it has to be. I'm a Black Friday Scrooge. I don't like it. And I do think if there is a particular thing or a few things that you know that you want or need, let's hope it's a need, and importantly, how much it should cost during the year, then you go on to a particular place that you know you're going to get a bargain and you find, 20% off, fine. You have then won at Black Friday. But anything else, as far as I'm concerned, just going into a shop or going onto a website going, wonder what there is, wonder what bargains I can get. No, you've lost before you've started because, as Philip points out, you are going to be sucked in. It's your influence. You've got this whole influence around you. So I say, just say no. Do tomorrow instead. Tomorrow, apparently, is Buy Nothing Day, International Buy Nothing Day. Now, I'm much more pro that. I think that's much greener as well.
Kate, let's go back to you. To what extent do you think that consumers are angry at retailers? Because retailers can use the word discount, can't they? They can convey the idea on a price tag or in their signage in the shop that they are offering goods cheaper than they otherwise would. But the legal sanctions for saying something that isn't strictly true are not all that great, are they?
There'll always be warnings about making sure that there is an authentic deal to be had. And we know that shoppers need to beware. We do know that there will be organisations that take advantage. But in the main, I think this is about solid relationships between organisations who are trying to just push the messaging. And I go back to the previous point, which is consumers want organisations to be better. 80% of consumers want organisations to be better. Now, that's a wide spread of an ask, but that came from a huge survey from the Centre of Progressive Policy, and that means improvement in all measures. So ask ourselves this: how can we see so many adverts relating to COP26 and environmental messages just a few weeks ago, and then we're seeing the overconsumption of messaging all about buying as much as you possibly can for Black Friday? Retailers really have to take a long, hard look at what they're saying and understand that this is about a longer-term relationship. It costs so much money to acquire customers that retailers should be looking at keeping hold of them, not just trying to win them over with deals. So I don't mind the thrill of a bargain chase as long as you can afford it and it's within budget and it doesn't put you into debt. We know 2022 is going to be such a hard year for many of us, with the rise of fuel and food increases. But I think what we've got to make sure is, are the retailers that we want to survive, we want them to be organisations that are there for the years to come, building these relationships to last, or is it just simply a passing opportunity through one day? It just doesn't make sense that way.
While Amazon will be OK, Philip, a lot of high street retailers, of course, have had a particularly difficult 18 months. Many of them have gone to the wall. Business rates are returning. VAT discounts are about to be ended for hospitality industries. The high street's being hollowed out. On the other hand, You've got Extinction Rebellion trying to tell people to stay away from the shops. Who's going to win here?
Well, not Extinction Rebellion, unless they were going to suddenly increase their numbers into the millions. Consumer behaviour is something that exists in a way that is quite separate from what people say when they're asked about their consumer behaviour. And we aren't suddenly going to draw a line at any point about the way we consume and the amount we consume arbitrarily, as much as we might feel passionately that there are strong arguments to do that now, in much the same way as if you were to go back in history and try and draw a line, you would look at, well, you know, where are we capping economic growth? Where are we capping opportunity for people? So the consumer, you know, what we will have is a market-driven response, which is retailers, companies trying to find ways to survive and prosper, trying to find things they can do to attract customers in, and consumers voting with their feet, responding to those things that appeal to them and not responding to those things that don't. And in that mix, we will see, I suspect, what we continue to see at the moment, which is that a lot of the things that people purport to care about when they're asked about it are not demonstrated in their behaviour when they're making choices.
Jasmine, what do you make of the fact that not here in the UK because Amazon isn't unionised, but across the world there's strike action against Amazon on this, the busiest day of the year? We've often talked on this show about the tech giants becoming more and more politically controversial. This is the start of a big trend, right?
Yes, I hope so. And good on them. I am absolutely behind those who are fighting Amazon, because Amazon has been entirely disgusting, in my view, in the way that it's treated its workers. And you will remember, was it last year? I think it was last year when the Amazon workers tried to unionise in America.
Yeah.
And Amazon used all sorts of tactics to simply break them up. And this cannot continue because they do not treat their workers properly. There are all sorts of stories about various people in different levels who have had very unhappy times.
Well, that's your view, Jasmine. It is just a view, and you're fully entitled to it. It's a free country. We did ask Amazon to talk to us, of course, and they provided us with this statement. A spokesman said to GB News earlier today, "At Amazon, we take our responsibilities very seriously. We know there is always more to do, and we'll continue to invent and invest on behalf of our employees, customers, small businesses and communities." And let me just extend here publicly an invitation to Amazon. If they ever want to come on the money, they're more than welcome. Thank you very much to all my guests. Philip Graves, consumer psychologist, the author of Consumerology. Kate Hardcastle, of course, retail specialist. Great to see you both. Jasmine, as ever, we'll see you on the money again soon. In the run up to Christmas, you can give us some more Christmas shopping tips. Now, our East of England reporter, Amelia Harper, is in Tilbury at an Amazon warehouse as Extinction Rebellion continue to protest outside several of the company's depots. Amelia, great to see you here on The Money. Are the protesters managing to cause disruption, or are they, from where you're standing, just making noise?
Well, Liam, there is a lot of disruption being caused here in Tilbury. Of course, Tilbury is a port town. There are haulage businesses all across here. And actually, as you can see behind me, the road that they are blockading is not just the road that leads to Amazon, but leads to several businesses behind me. And I've been speaking to a lot of haulage employees who are here, who are absolutely not happy about what is happening today. Of course, Extinction Rebellion are targeting Amazon on what is their busiest Black Friday day of the year. They plan to be here for 48 hours, although, Liam, it is getting increasingly cold as we're waiting for Storm Arwen to come through this weekend. They say they're going to stay here despite that. But let's have a look at the business impacts of this. Well, Extinction Rebellion say they are here because of the, in their words, exploitative and environmentally disruptive business practices. That's referencing Amazon, disregard for workers' rights and in the name of company profits, and the wastefulness of Black Friday. Well, you read out the Amazon right of reply. They said that they are going to be net zero by 2040, but you can possibly hear in the background, just in front of me, there is a large roundabout, and lots of haulage trucks are trying to come in and out of here. And I've spoken to one employee on a condition of anonymity, Liam, and he has said that tens of thousands of pounds has been lost this morning because of the disruption disruption, because behind me, to the left over my shoulder towards that direction, there is a haulage business there. They say that they have 80 to 100 trucks that cannot get in or out. They also say that night shift drivers are stuck. They cannot get back in. And the problem is that they are now, police here are turning those drivers away to wait in port areas, essentially, in those lorry parks, and they don't know what they're doing. They are actually currently bargaining with Extinction Rebellion to try and come up with a solution by 2 p.m. But there's a second problem, Liam, because this is not just Extinction Rebellion that's causing a problem. Amazon workers are also striking over pay and conditions, as you were just speaking about just now. Those are affecting some factories across the UK, including in Colville, Leicestershire, Coventry, Peterborough, and in its London's headquarters. And this is, as you said, by the Make Amazon Pay campaign. It's backed by a number of groups, including GMB, the union, who are not happy with how Amazon is treating its workers. And I'm going to end on Amazon's right of reply, because it's important that they have their right of reply as well. They say Amazon said its critics were using incomplete information, insisting most ambulance call-outs to its building. This was after actually a claim from GMB, from a Freedom of Information Act, found that ambulance call-outs over health concerns at Amazon warehouses increased by almost 50% in the run-up to Black Friday. But Amazon say they are related to pre-existing conditions, not work-related incidents. But Liam, it's an interesting day for Amazon, and it's not yet clear exactly how this is going to affect those profit margins for them.
Nicely done, Amelia Harper there, our East of England correspondent at Tilbury. Amelia, you might want to get your puffer jacket out at the ready, and possibly a brolly looking at that sky. Thanks so much for joining us here on The Money. You're watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be rounding off GB News' Northern Ireland Week. I just returned from a trip to Belfast, Coleraine and Enniskillen. Very nice it was too. Stay with us. You're On The Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Storm Arwen is hitting the UK today. There are a number of Met Office warnings issued, and there is a threat to life across parts of the east coast of Scotland, northeast England, where the winds are going to be particularly severe. Here is that storm system heading its way south through the North Sea, but it's as the isobars squeeze together here across first northern and then eastern Scotland down into northeast England later today that the winds will potentially cause some significant damage and disruption. But right across the UK, the winds will be picking up through the day, and we could see some problems. So there is a number of warnings in place, yellow warnings covering much of the UK, but the most severe weather likely across the eastern side of Scotland into northeast England. There will be snow accompanying those strengthening winds as well over the hills across northern Scotland. We have warnings in place for that snow also. For the bulk of the heart of the country, plenty of sunshine around through this afternoon, some rain across East Anglia and the southeast, showers in the west. Feeling cold out there, and particularly as those winds strengthen. The strongest winds likely late afternoon into the evening down that eastern side of Scotland into northeast England. Damaging gusts of wind, flying debris, the threats to power, certainly major disruption to travel routes along that coastal strip. But everywhere, gusty winds through this evening and overnight, and this zone of wet weather sinking south, well, that could bring a covering of snow, certainly over hills, but even in places at low levels. The winds will remain strong. That'll help to keep the temperatures up a little bit, but if you are heading out tonight, it will feel cold. A cold start to the weekend. The winds will slowly ease during Saturday, but still very lively, and still the potential for this mixture of rain, sleet and snow across parts of eastern England during Saturday morning. Further west, it's largely dry, fine and sunny, but it will be cold as that wind only slowly eases down. Again, a cold feeling day. The Met Office warnings are on the Met Office website. Please keep up to date today.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money. Now, this is GB News Northern Ireland Week, and for the last few days, I've been presenting On the Money from Northern Ireland. We're devoting the rest of today's show to a look back on the week, reflecting on what we learned over recent days about peace, prosperity and the protocol. Together with GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey, I joined our Northern Ireland correspondent Dougie Beattie as we presented this show from the capital city, Belfast, on Tuesday, and Enniskillen on Wednesday, down in there in Fermanagh, close to the Republic of Ireland border, and Coleraine on Thursday on Northern Ireland's beautiful northern coast. Now, the Northern Ireland economy is traditionally built on manufacturing, not least when Belfast was the shipbuilding capital of the world. Today's manufacturers tend to be more high-tech. And the economy is also focused on services, not least financial services, as well as agriculture and food processing. Many Northern Ireland businesses, like Elite Electronics in Fermanagh, have been grappling with the Northern Ireland Protocol, which since Brexit has kept the province within the European Union's single market, unlike the rest of the UK. But the boss of this particular firm thinks the protocol is an opportunity.
So that's a positive that, from Northern Ireland's perspective, is something that we should be cherishing and nurturing and developing to make sure that we maintain that advantage. So that's an advantage that we have over Scotland, England and Wales.
Many unionists, those who want Northern Ireland to stay part of the UK, worry that the protocol treats them differently from the rest of the country. Yet the idea Northern Ireland could benefit economically from this special status is spreading. Here's Nicole Ross, the co-owner of a manufacturing business just outside Belfast.
Certainly, we have a very niche marketplace here with one foot in the UK and one foot in the EU. So there's great potential there to what businesses can do in this niche market. I think certainly great opportunities for the next year or two.
Now, Northern Ireland has traditionally produced plenty of top craftsmen, and construction remains a big part of the economy. I visited the specialist joinery group in Derry, Londonderry, which exports bespoke joinery across the world and employs 150 people. The CEO of this world-class firm could live anywhere, but Kieran O'Hagan chooses to stay in Northern Ireland. Come a long way, haven't we, since the 70s, 80s and 90s?
Dramatic difference. Dramatic difference. I'm a homebird, and this is my home, and this is where my roots are. This is where my family is. This is where the family of specialist group is, and I have absolutely no aspirations to move anywhere else in the world.
Northern Ireland's been through a lot, of course. From the late 60s to late 90s, violence among both Catholic and Protestant paramilitaries alike loomed large. But the 1998 Belfast Good Friday Agreement has promoted both peace and prosperity, which is why Glenn Wheeler, this young entrepreneur and father from Enniskillen, is also determined to stay.
I grew up in the middle of all that, and it probably made me who I am today.
In what sense? That's interesting.
I don't know, it probably toughened us up a wee bit, maybe. Yeah. It was hard at times, absolutely, but like we still made great friends, and we've come such a long way since then. We don't really look back, and it's been looking forward now, and like I don't want my kids to be growing up in that, environment that there's a divide between.
You're betting everything on peace and prosperity here, aren't you? Everything, your life, your family.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's a big call. Now, the best thing about Northern Ireland is the people of Northern Ireland, a resilient and determined bunch, whichever community they're from. I enjoyed spending time there, and I will be back soon, I promise you that. And for the rest of the show, we'll be rounding off GB News' Northern Ireland Week with more interviews and discussions about this beautiful part of the UK, home to some of the best businesses on the island of Ireland. So stay with us. This is GB News, and you're on the money. As you saw there, just a taster from the many interviews that I conducted, that Darren McCaffrey conducted, that Doogie Beattie conducted. GB News spoke to some fabulous business owners during our time in Northern Ireland this week. Now, someone who knows the Northern Ireland business community pretty well is Roger Pollen. He's head of the Federation of Small Businesses in Northern Ireland, and I'm delighted that Roger joins me now live from County Down. Roger, the island of Ireland, North and the Republic, it produces so many small businessmen and women. So much of the economy is small and medium-sized enterprises, people working for themselves, ploughing their own furrow. Why do you think that is?
Sorry,